In the coming weeks on Reading Culture, we're going to be looking at a series of texts. And the cultural manifestation which we are going to be focusing upon is the concept of the hero and of heroism in these texts. Now, some of these texts are generally explicitly heroic and would usually be characterized as heroic texts. Beowulf or Henry V or the Ills of the King. These are heroic in many ways by definition. Other texts will not be, including some of the texts we will be looking at first. Now, before we begin to explore the concept of the hero and of heroism in these texts, it is necessary that we first consider what we mean by hero. We need to define our terms if we're going to have any kind of fruitful discussion about these things. So, what are we talking about? What do we mean when we say hero? Well, the word hero in English derives from the Latin heros, which in turn comes from ancient Greek. Originally, a hero was a mythological character, someone of superhuman strength and ability favored by the gods. Think of Hercules or Achilles in Homer's Iliad. These characters are heroes because of what they can do, but it's not a matter of morality. Morality doesn't enter into it. There's no question of character or virtue involved. It's simply a matter of their physical abilities and their relationships, at least possibly in some cases, to some kind of divinity. Eventually, the term hero comes to take on the sense of noble martial action. That is to say, right, a warrior or a soldier who performs noble deeds. So there's still that sense of the warrior and the martial aspect, the physical strength. But now the moral has entered into it. The sense is not that they're just strong, but that they use their strength in a moral and or a noble way. So perhaps Achilles, in this sense, you could argue, isn't necessarily a hero, but perhaps Hector would be in Homer's Iliad. Going from there, it eventually takes on the sense of anyone who performs a laudable or noble deed in any field. So a doctor or a lawyer, they can be a hero, even if it's not martial. You see that broadening out and almost kind of democratization of the term, right? Heroism has much more facets as the term broadens out in its scope. Eventually, it goes even perhaps beyond that. There's simply the sense of, again, laudability, right? Particularly with the addition of the possessive, right? My hero. In other words, the sense of objective deed performing is perhaps lessened, and the more subjective sense of a personal sense of admiration being the determining factor in whether or not someone is a hero. Finally, it eventually takes on a literary use, the idea of a protagonist of a narrative that one is supposed to admire and supposed to feel for and identify with, that they're the hero. So you see this shift again from the more action-based mythological hero of the ancient Greeks to a more personal, right, sense of someone who's laudable, or at least performs laudable deeds. So how do we reconcile this? And how are we going to define this as we go forward, as we think about heroes and heroism in the text that we will be looking at? I am not at this point going to impose a definition, but I would like to consider a few things. First of all, it should be noted that we are not, for the most part, going to be looking at texts that have divine heroes. So we can kind of discard that initial sense of the demigod. Also, many of these texts will fall into the realm of having a protagonist, and often a protagonist, it seems, we are meant to identify with. So we have a hero in that sense. That will probably yield less discussion. Some of the main characters of these texts will certainly be martial. Right? Henry V, Beowulf, right? These will fall nicely into that category, but not all of them will. So perhaps we will deploy that at some points and other times discard it. Finally, it's worth thinking about this sense of nobility, of laudability. Now, it has to be more than simply what we personally find laudable, or we'll be talking across purposes, but let's think a little bit about this idea of the hero as that person who performs noble deeds, who is laudable, who is worth of admiration. That, it seems, could possibly yield the most interesting discussion.